To everyone, welcome to the Falls Church regular meeting of the City Council on Monday, November 27th, 2023. I'd like to call our meeting to order and ask that you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
The United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Leon?
Here.
Ms. Sean-Siskod?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Do we have a motion regarding the meeting agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have a meeting agenda now. Before we get started, I do want to make note of a sad occasion, which is the passing of Jimmy Alverson, who was a wonderful young man who battled brain cancer for 7 years, 2021 graduate of George Mason High School. He'd come before this body, City Council, I think in 2000, maybe 16, to receive a proclamation for Brain Tumor Awareness Month. Anyway, he passed away this past week, and I think we all as a community are very saddened by that. Jimmy loved sports, baseball, hockey, golf. He majored in sports and recreation at James Madison University, but he was beloved by his class at George Mason and by many members of this community, and I think was an inspiration to all of us, and he battled his illness with strength and dignity and courage. And anyway, I just ask that you all please keep his family and him in your thoughts and prayers. I have asked the flags be lowered today. Falls Church City flags be lowered today in his honor, which has happened today, and ask them if you join me in a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you. So our next item on the agenda is a commendation for the many years of service of our colleague Debbie Hiscott to the Falls Church Education Foundation. So Debbie's here with us today, right on the end, and I'm going to go ahead and read a letter of commendation from your colleagues here on City Council. On behalf of the Falls Church City Council, I'd like to express my gratitude for your contributions to the City of Falls Church as Executive Director of the Falls Church Education Foundation. The Falls Church Education Foundation has supported the Falls Church City Public Schools since 2004, ensuring that our community continues to fund quality education for all. Under your leadership, this relationship has continued to strengthen and evolve. Over the last decade, you led the Education Foundation in anticipating the emerging needs of FCCPS and solidifying support for existing programs. Your diligent guidance in launching new projects like the Family Assistance Fund, Super Grants, Teacher Training Grants, and Memorial Scholarship has ensured that these initiatives align with community needs and address concerns of a variety of stakeholder groups. The relationships you have built between the Falls Church Education Foundation, school staff, PTAs, and booster groups, and the larger community will continue to serve the organization into the future. In just the last 5 years, the FCEF has raised over $2 million. It is no surprise that FCEF was named Nonprofit Organization of the Year under your leadership. As you move on to your new role, you leave behind a thriving organization poised to continue contributing to the success of the schools. Your work truly embodies the three pillars of FCEF, ensuring equity of access, staff readiness, and student preparedness for the 21st century. I know you will bring the same dedication and passion for relationship building to your work as Executive Director of Smart City Works. Thank you for your commitment to supporting education in the City of Falls Church. Many well wishes for your future endeavors, and congratulations on a job well done. So,
Thank you, Mayor, and just a quick thank you to our community and our business community and the city staff for making so many events possible and making so many of the programs possible. And of note, Jimmy Alverson was also a scholarship recipient of the Wallenberg Scholarship. He had a full ride scholarship to JMU, and it was a pleasure to be able to help him, support him through the opportunities he had at JMU. He loved it so much, so thank you.
all right, why don't you come on up? All right, so now we're on to oaths of office. Any oaths of office to administer?
No, I don't believe so. Thank you.
All right, let's keep on going. Before we get to public comment, I do want to thank Sophie, sitting in the yellow mask, for some incredible snacks and cookies she made for the holiday spirit. I wish you in the audience could try them. They're absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much. We just went to a Winter Wonderland celebration as well, and I want to thank all those who organized it, my colleague Letty Hardy and others, for a really great evening. So anyway, thank you to all for a really, really nice afternoon and evening. Let's move on now to our next item, which is public comment. Madam Clerk?
Have our summary of written comments that you received since your last regular meeting. Joseph Dogger of 321 James Street wrote to request that bicycle facilities and other transportation projects be funded in the budget, as did Jacob Williams of 505 Roosevelt Boulevard, who also provided data on bike share usage in the city. In regard to the HARB denial of a request to raise a barn at 1011 Fowler Street, we had several letters. Dr. Michelina Bonanno of 1016 Fowler Street requested that the City Council affirm the HARB's decision. Daniel Clinton asked that the City Council reverse the HARB's decision, as did Anna Lee, 1505 Crane Street, and John Murphy of 308 Chestnut Street. Comments on the legislative program. The following wrote in support of pursuing a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers: Jennifer Anderson, John Coleman of 214 Lawton Street, Mark Schenken of 712 Northwest Street. The following wrote in support of pursuing a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers and expanding speed cameras: Greg Burry, who also advocated for a pedestrian path from downtown to the Eden Center, and Pat Conley of 455 South Maple Avenue. Leslie Rye supports an increase in speed cameras, but not a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. And John Measley does not support the proposed change to the city charter to allow those who are not U.S. citizens to serve on city boards. He opposes increased use of speed cameras and as well as opposes a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. In other comments, Nader and Bernadette Baruch of 243 Gundry Drive provided extensive comments on the proposed Quinn Homestretch project in advance of your last work session. Henry Bartholomew wrote with concerns about new traffic calming projects on city streets and requested a more robust process when developing such programs. And finally, Bob Lajeunesse wrote with concerns about the Little City gift card program.
All right, thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to receipt of public comment. That's for folks either in the room right now or on the internet. And you all are welcome to speak. If you wish to do so, I ask that you get a card from the lobby, the little purple cards maybe some of you have seen. Fill one out, hand them to the clerk. And when your name is called, please go to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. So let's go ahead and go on to receipt of public comment.
And I will mention, if you're here for the public hearing, the mayor will also open that, and there will be a chance for public comment at that time as well.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, if you want to speak to the appeal, you can do that now if you'd like, or you can do that when the appeal is heard. It's up to you.
Okay, so we have Dave Gustafson, who would like to speak about legislative priorities. And he you can state your name and address, please.
Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, Sophie. Mayor Tarter, members of council, thank you. Thank you all. I wanted to start off with a couple of thank yous. First of all, thank you very much for the Trammell Branch Stormwater Project. It is in terrific shape, and during some of the big storms that we had kind of later in the summer, I was down there, and all the extra capacity that we have in there is just wonderful to see. Before they closed everything up, during some of the storms that we had in the past that would have been concerning to folks in our watershed, they were low-lying. There was only like maybe 4 or 5 inches of water in the bottom of the new pipe, and so it was just a delight to see. So a big thank you to you all and council members of the past who made that happen. A big thank you to the Public Works Department, especially the stormwater project managers, and to the finance folks and everybody else and our other city leaders that made that happen, because I know that was a delight to see in a few short years something of that magnitude come to fruition. So a big, and all the neighbors are elated. So I'm hoping that you'll hear from more of them. But hopefully that's kind of over and done with. So thank you very much. Also, just want to say thank you for the appointment to the Nova Parks Board. Look forward to working with you all for any parks-related issues that you may have with the WNOD, et cetera. Also, thank you for passing the Community Energy Action Plan. And related to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the legislative priorities that you have before you. But just real quick, thank you, Mayor Tarter and Councilman Duncan, for your service. It's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and so look forward to seeing you around, back to your regular lives as citizens. And congratulations again, Vice Mayor Hardy, on your reelection, and Councilmember-elect Flynn and Councilmember-elect Underhill as well. Regarding the legislative priorities that you have before you, and again, I'm just speaking for myself as a citizen tonight, but I was very excited to see that you had the considered action on leaf blowers in there. This is kind of the most challenging time of the year for a lot of citizens, especially those who work from home, and the deafening noise that comes with the gas-powered leaf blowers. I know I was part of the problem for many years. I have a terrific lawn guy, and I've tried to work with him to get him to eventually stop using them after I've learned more about how bad they are for the workers that have to ingest the fumes and the damage that happens to their hearing, how much that the sound waves that come off of those can just penetrate buildings, and there's not much that you can do with them. So even in my own home with better insulation, better windows, I have my hearing protection on, I can still hear them. So I urge you to seek that ability to regulate those in the future. And thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you for yours. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. And thanks for your praise of the stormwater. I know that's high praise coming from you. And anyway, thanks for coming out. Madam Clerk?
That is it. I don't have anybody online, and that's the only person who signed up, so thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the report of the city manager. Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. Just a few things to report on. First, I just wanted the council to be aware of a meeting that we had today with Fairfax County staff on sewer capacity. And it was a very productive meeting where we discussed the city's plans to purchase additional treatment capacity from Fairfax County. There is plenty of capacity at the treatment plant and plenty of capacity in the conveyance system for average daily flows. What we're in discussions with the county on is addressing peak flows. And those are derived from rain-induced inflow and infiltration into the system. And as Mr. Gustafson knows from the Stormwater Task Force, this has been an issue for the city, for city residents, and for Fairfax County residents during extreme rain events. And so what we are working on with Fairfax County is an agreement by which we will have a schedule of work for mitigating those peak flows in the sanitary sewer collection system as we purchase additional capacity for treatment and conveyance to the Alexandria treatment plant. So we will have a briefing on with City Council on some of those strategies, what the costs of those will be. Those do have a very significant and positive environmental benefit. Those high peak flows can discharge into the Potomac River. That's why Alexandria is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to address it in the city, and it's something that the whole region is trying to address, and the city will be in partnership with our surrounding jurisdictions on that work. So more to come on that, but I wanted to inform the council of effective discussions on that policy point. Secondly, progress on our affordable home ownership. We provide a monthly report to City Council on the affordable home ownership program, as well as the Virginia Village project, and we'll have our monthly report coming out in early December. But I did want to note that we'll have our third closing on the affordable home ownership program tomorrow. Our burn rate, or our public subsidy rate for these projects, this will be a third one, is averaging about $200,000 per unit, inclusive of the markdown in price for affordability, the fee to NHB, and remodeling and upgrades to the properties. So at that rate, we think we are currently, at any rate, with these initial projects, in line with our original projections for the number of approximately 18 is what we were hoping for, homes that we'd be able to secure as affordable homes for the 99-year term of those covenants. We do have a fourth that's under contract right now, and so that progress is moving along. A couple of notes on holiday programs that are moving forward. The first is we will bring back the holiday Little City bonus gift card program again this year. So look on the city's website for information on this. It is a bonus program where if you buy a gift card for a loved one or a friend, and there's a 50% bonus in terms of what you'll get back in terms of value that is placed on that card. And it can be redeemed at about 75 participating local businesses. So it's a great way to support our local economy and spread holiday cheer at the same time. EDO staff are also working hard to get ready for Falls Church Restaurant Week, which will be in some of the quieter periods after the holiday in late January, an opportunity for us to really promote the wonderful restaurants that are across the city. And of course, the Little City gift card is redeemable at many of those local restaurants. And the last thing I will note is that we have the annual holiday gift and craft show coming up this coming Saturday, December 2nd, from 9 to 4. And the children's shop open from 9 to 3. This is all at the community center. And on Sunday from 3 to 11, Sunday, December 3rd, from 11 to 4 p.m. We'll also be giving away 75th anniversary shopping bags at the craft fair as we continue our year-long celebration of the 75th anniversary of the city. That's all I have to report tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for the city manager? Okay, that was quick. How about council? Well, there is. Ms. Leon.
Thanks, Mr. Shields. Just on the affordable housing update, could you just clarify for the public, when we purchase that fourth house, are we supporting a diversity of unit types? Like what is in our inventory, and for that fourth one that we're purchasing, what's the unit size? It's not just all studios, right?
That is correct. And So one thing that we do is when we're working with our clients, as they go through the eligibility process to qualify for the loan and to get ready to be able to sign a mortgage for these homes, we do get information in terms of what kind of unit they're looking for. And we will go out into the community and try to target those types of units. So let me just see if I can kind of easily get a quick summary of the types of units that we have. We've had a condo, we've had a townhouse style that actually is sold legally as a condo, but it looks like a townhouse. I'll sort of, in the memo, well, let's see. We have a mix of bedroom units, so it's not all one-bedroom studios. Two of the units that of the three that we have closing on are two-bedroom units, just as an example.
Yeah.
So these are, for families as well as individuals.
Yeah, so I just want to really reiterate a big appreciation on just giving consistent updates. I know I'm probably up here, sounding like a broken record on those updates, but I think it's really meaningful to highlight, our progress in that space, given that, this is a net new program, thanks to Amazon grant funding in the past year, and it would be wonderful if we took a look at how we can scale, right, that in the future. So shared equity, very, very innovative, and I think it's super helpful and wonderful benefit that we can provide. So thank you for that.
And I'm just noting here that the one that will close on tomorrow is a three-bedroom unit, and so I just wanted to note that as well. So those are the types of units that
And
we're
I
able to acquire.
love hearing the diversity of the stock types. Second question is there an update on the recruiting for our police chief that we want to provide to the public? How's that coming along?
Well, thank you for that. And so we had the advertisement out in our recruitment for police chief. That closed on November 4th. We had 37 applicants apply, which we were very pleased with, a really very strong candidate pool. The city is working with the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police to provide us with a bit of perspective as we vet the candidates who have applied. We will be having an initial round of interviews in early December. And then with the finalists, we do intend to have an opportunity for the finalists to have interaction with key stakeholders in the community, as well as members of the police department. And so there'll be more communication on that, how people can participate in that process with the finalists. Our goal is to have a selection by the end of this month, sort of between the mid and end of December, and have a new chief in office in January.
Okay, so those community stakeholder forums are looking like it would hit in January or more in December?
In December.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
And we also are having a retirement celebration for our outgoing chief, Mary Gavin, and that will be on Thursday, December 14th. And if we will have word out to the community on that. The Falls Church is hosting that event, and so that's where that celebration will be.
You said the Falls Church is, so where's it going to be, though? I'm kidding. At the Falls Church, in Falls Church. Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Couple things. So first, the street tree lights have made it to Haycock, so thank you to staff who've been working on those and continue to troubleshoot those for the holiday season. Second request is, we had a great budget and finance meeting last week. Was it just last week now? And so I wanted to see whether the city manager could, so thank you to staff who prepared for that. It was really informative discussion on BPOL, and then I think towards the end we rushed and talked about kind of the Q1 financial results. Could we get both of those distributed to the rest of council? Because I do think that's both valuable information and good prep before our budget guidance discussion over the next few weeks as well.
Absolutely.
And then my third thing is, we had talked about kind of the Leave the Leaves kind of public awareness campaign, and while we are in the throes of leaf season, I would love to see more public communication about kind of another way to handle your leaves besides raking them to the street is, the composting or mow mulching your leaves or, other leave the leaf strategies, I think would be great for the city to promote.
Breaking them in your neighbor's yard.
Let the wind blow them everywhere.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other comments from Mr. Shields? How about any council requests? Any council requests? All right. Why don't we move on to business on the agenda? Madam Clerk?
Yes, our first matter is a public hearing on an appeal to the City Council to reverse the Historic Architectural Advisory Board's denial of an application to raise a protected structure at 1011 Fowler Street.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shields, I know you have staff report or one of
We
your staff
do.
members do.
So Cameron Garris is our lead staff for this. Cameron staffs the Historic Architectural Review Board, and he will provide a report to the City Council. Following his report, we will hear from the Historic Architectural Review Board itself, and then following that presentation, we'll hear from the applicant. And then we would anticipate any council questions or comments. This also is a public hearing, and so then we would have input from the public at large on this case. What is before council is an appeal of the, and Mr. Garris will go into this, of a HARB determination with respect to a barn that is located at the property at 111 Fowler Street. And the applicant desires to raise the barn. The HARB denied the permit to raise the barn, and that is what is being appealed to the City Council. The staff recommendation is to uphold the HARB determination for the relocation of the barn as opposed to raising it. Mr. Cameron, Mr. Garris, thank you for your work on this, and we'll turn it over to you.
Hello all. I'll begin starting off with the request. Line 4 of the staff report. City Council's requested to hold a public hearing and decide on an appeal of the Historic Architectural Review Board's denial of an application to raise the structure protected by HGC code. The subject structure is a barn located at 1011 Fowler Street, Lot B. Staff recommends that the City Council affirm HARB's denial. Staff finds that the board's decision was not contrary to law and was made with due consideration in accordance to HGC code, and its decision was supported by evidence dated. In line 17, you can see that the City Council may also, if they find that HARB's decision was contrary to law, reverse or modify the decision by HARB. Line 21 states that in the case that Council affirms HARB's decision, the applicant has the right to market the property for sale under a period of 12 months at fair market value to all parties that are willing to preserve or restore the structure. If no parties have entered the sales contract, the property owner is entitled to raise the structure. Going into the background in line 33, the applicant is Ms. Karen Morrison, owner of 1011 Fowler Street, lots A and B. The subject property is 1011 Fowler Street, Lot B, where the barn is located. The project proposal, the applicant requests to raise the existing barn so that they may sell the land of Lot B and develop a new single-family home. Going to line 44, role of council. As outlined in the City Code, Section 48-796, whenever a permit is denied to HARB, the applicant has the right to appeal to it and be heard before City Council. At the public hearing, City Council shall hear representative of HARB. City Council, as stated in the recommendation, shall review and record and may reverse or modify the decision of HARB if it finds the decision is contrary to law or its decision is not supported by preponderance of evidence, or it may affirm the decision of the HARB. City Council may also remand the matter back to HARB if new evidence is presented to City Council. Going into site history, line 54, the tract of land was originally subdivided from 9 acres in 1890. In 1968, it was subdivided again into the 2 lots that we know now as Lot A and Lot B, which have always been under a single ownership. In 1985, 1011 Fowler Street was designated a protected historic structure by the Historical Commission. Also in 1977, a storm nearly demolished the barn and it was reconstructed partially. Going into the application history, line 83, in April 27, 2023, applicant came to HARB to modify the existing home residence on Lot A. During that meeting, discussion of the barn first began. HARB Vice Chair Moore requested that staff research city code to find if the ancillary structure was protected against raising. Line 100, May 9th, 2023, zoning administrator reviewed relevant city code and determined ancillary structures such as the barn are protected under HCC code 106, June 26. Applicant requested to raise the barn on Lot B. HARB motion to deny the request to raise the barn was unanimously approved. HARB recommended putting the lot back on the market with a condition to the buyer the barn be moved to Lot A before a home can be constructed. Line 129, July 13th, applicant requests to move the barn. HARB motion to approve the relocation of the barn was approved unanimously. Line 141, October 26, applicant again applies to raise the barn. HARB motion to deny the request to raise the barn was approved unanimously. Applicant stated a reasoning of financial burden. The applicant also shared the recently discovered photo of the barn partially reconstructed from the storm in the 1970s. HARB maintained that any certified structure is still historic despite partial reconstruction or renovation. This has been a precedent upheld in previous applications by HARB. Line 160, applicant appeals to HARB on October 27th, and November 3rd reschedules for it to be November 27th. On line 164, I'll give a summation of the reasoning for the applicant's appeal. As stated before, the applicant states the tree in the 1977 storm caused extensive damage to the barn, and large portions of it were replaced with non-historic materials. The barn is also in a state, arguably, that is not structurally sound. And lastly, the applicant states economic hardship prohibits any attempt to move the barn. And now I'll jump to line 217. When reviewing a raise, HARB is required to look at five criteria outlined in the HCC code, section 48-794. And I'll read over the five criteria and give HARB's findings for each. The first criteria is the building of such architectural or historical interest that raising it would be detrimental to public interest. HARB members recognize the barn is one of five remaining in the city and therefore valuable to public interest. Criteria number 2 is the design and texture of the materials of the building so old or unusual that it could not be reproduced or reconstructed in a financially reasonable manner. HARB members believe that attempting to move the barn would be far less costly than trying to reconstruct it. Criteria number 3 is the barn structurally sound or can be made sound at a reasonable cost. 2 HARB members who are licensed architects examined the barn and believed the barn was possible to move, given appropriate precautions. HARB also reasoned that the burden of the cost should not be entirely on the applicant but the buyer. HARB recommended placing the barn and the lot back on the market to find an interested buyer who'd be willing to incur the cost needed to move the barn to Lot A. Criteria number 4, if maintained or rehabilitated and used under existing zoning, can the building be expected to yield a reasonable return or beneficial use at a reasonable cost to the owner? HARB found that rehabilitation was a secondary issue to relocation due to the needs of the contracted buyer and builder to acquire permits to begin constructing the home on Lot B. And lastly, criteria 5, could the building be saved from raising by moving to another site, thus making its present site available for redevelopment in accordance with existing zoning? HARB Harb believed that if correct precautions were taken, that a moving service with knowledgeable historic structures was used, then the barn could be moved. Alternatively, the barn could be disassembled and moved into pieces to Lot A and reconstructed at a later date. Based on upon the review by Harb in response to code criteria, staff finds the measures Harb used to make determinations to deny the request to raise the barn were not contrary to law, and its decision was supported by thorough evidence and reasoning. That concludes my staff report.
All right.
you all.
Thank you very much. And do we have a representative from Harb here who'd like to speak? Mr. Moore?
Good evening. I'm Charles Moore. I'm the Vice Chair of the Historic Architectural Review Board. I'm joined tonight by 4 of the 5 members of the board with me, so we're represented well. In 1984, the City Council created the HCC, the Historic Conservation Overlay District, to protect historic structures in the City of Falls Church, of which there are around 100. And since that time, the city has worked hard to maintain the small number of historic structures. Our board met with the applicant 3 times. We've submitted a letter to council with our criteria, which we'll be happy to answer questions regarding that. A couple things that I did want to say, just to add to our statement. We were guided initially by the policy and purposes of intent of the HCC ordinance, which lays out the reasons that we have a historic ordinance in the City of Falls Church. In the city, we've got very few ancillary structures, barns, and agrarian structures left. We count possibly 5. This is one of the 5, and it has sort of a special place in our consciousness of the historic ordinance and preservation. In reviewing the ordinance, the board did not feel that the applicant met the criteria for raising, that raising was not supported by the applicant. However, relocating the building was supported, and that was something that the board recommended. We would be happy to take any questions, answer anything that we can do to facilitate your discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now turn to the applicant. If the applicant would like to make a presentation of any kind, you're most welcome to do so now.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and city manager, and Madam City Attorney and clerk. I'm Brian O'Connor, 305 Timber Lane. I'm an attorney and member of the Bar of Virginia, and the applicant, Karen Morrison, asked me to appear on her behalf to speak to you about this appeal. And she asked me to take a look at the situation and give her my opinion, which I did, and thus she asked me to come here. Now, I am here to tell you that the HARB decision is against the law and the evidence and the facts and should be reversed. And you should make a decision to permit raising this barn. Now, I want to also, before I get into my remarks, ask Mr. Raymond Friedland to speak to you. He is an engineer who looked at this barn very carefully. His report of May 30, 2023 was before the HARB and is in your package. But he was asked by Ms. Morrison to come here, and by the way, she is appearing by Zoom because she's under the weather. So I'm going to ask him to come. He has travel after this meeting, so I was a courtesy to him. I wanted to let him speak and then leave, and of course you can ask him any questions that you have. And I don't want to prevent Mr. Moore from, as you may choose to also ask him questions if he wishes to.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Ray Freeland. I'm a licensed professional engineer in Virginia, Maryland, D.C., and I own an engineering company. We do architectural, structural, civil engineering, and I'm also a Class A licensed Virginia contractor. And one of the things we specialize in is structural stabilizations and renovations and repairs. So I've seen a lot of this stuff. And what caught me, right out of the gate is you have these 5 points that you guys follow to determine whether, whether these structures are historical. There's a lot of, arbitrariness and things that aren't real clear, and a lot of it's subject to opinion. As I was going down through these, the building, I'll start with number 1. The building is of a unique architectural and historic interest, such that raising it would be detrimental to the public interest. That barn was completely destroyed practically in 1970. The roof was gone, the floor system was gone, and it was repaired with not real modern day, but modern day materials from the 1970s. There's no, unique architectural features to that structure. There's no construction methods that are unique. There's no, mortise and pinion connections and those types of things. And, the materials were available off the shelf in that time period. So that, struck me as saying it in the public interest, it would be in the public safety to raise that structure because it's definitely not stable. It's not safe. There's people, if they ever get access to that, it could create some serious issues and liability. So, the foundation, I've done a lot of work in downtown Fredericksburg, and some other places, a lot of historic structures on Caroline Street, and Princess Anne Street. And, old materials are very obvious. Footers are made out of stone. Materials and construction practices are done from that area of time. This has nothing like that. It's CMU, concrete masonry unit blocks. It was rebuilt with pressure-treated timbers in the one end. It was covered with some, pressure-treated sheathing, plywood sheathing on the back wall. So there's really nothing, in my opinion, that makes this a very unique structure other than its age. And, in my opinion, the age was kind of mitigated when the tree fell on top of it. So it became, a 1970 structure, if you will, at that point. The second criteria is design, texture, and material of the building are so old and unusual for the building that the building could not be reproduced or reconstructed in a financially reasonable manner. And there was a number of $300,000 that was quoted in this report that building would cost $300,000 to rebuild. Well, I think that is a very high estimate. I mean, there's no plumbing, there's no water, I don't know if the electric even works. There's no sewer. It's basically a big shed that had a tree fall down on it and destroyed it. So I would have to argue on that point. The building can be made structurally sound at a reasonable cost. That's a real good one. So reasonable cost. What exactly is reasonable cost? Is it $100,000? Is it $1 million? Is it $10,000? What is reasonable, and who decides what is reasonable? These people are private citizens, and obviously cost is a concern, as it should be. And I would question if that building can be made structurally sound without substantial financial hardship. There was a couple architects that looked at it, and they said it could be structurally, could be turned reasonably structurally adequate. I just don't see where the logic and the methodology and the practices that they would use to do that. You know, it's very easy to look at these types of historic structures and say, oh yeah, I could stabilize that. When when you get inside of these historic buildings, everything's covered up. You know, you could run into all kinds of things, and that's very obviously in the floor system. In this particular building, it's a mess. It would take, you know, some pretty significant engineering and cost and design work to get that part alone structurally stable. Number 4, the building could be expected to yield a reasonable return or beneficial use relative to the cost of relocation. Again, what is a reasonable return? What are you going to do with a building, a structure like that's in that bad a shape? You know, it may be okay for storing a lawnmower. You know, there was mention of accessory dwelling units could bring value to it. That building could never be turned into an accessory dwelling unit just because of the location and the condition of it. So it's really, in my opinion, very limited value other than the age it was built in the 1980s. Excuse me, in the 1890s. The other thing it said, number 5, the building can be saved from razing by moving it to another site. Okay, so I would like to get some more information on, you know, who thinks that and what would need to be done, in their opinion, of the two architects, of what would have to be done to move that. In my opinion, I don't see any way you're going to move that in one piece, because it's going to be in thousands of pieces if you try that. And you know, we have 2 engineers, licensed engineers in Virginia that stated, you know, the building is in such a structural state that it's a safety hazard and there's not a whole lot you can do with it without spending exorbitant amounts of money. So really, that's all I have to say. I mean, I've been involved with many historic properties in Fredericksburg. Did the coffee warehouse. We did Marshall's Mercantile. We did one up on Caroline Street that was built in 1790s. Very old historic structures. I've been in probably 20 buildings down in Caroline Street. And all of them are in considerably better condition than this. This building is... the tree definitely didn't help it. It pretty much destroyed, you know, what structural integrity it had. And when it was rebuilt with, you know, modern day materials. So that's my thoughts on this issue, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Mr. O'Brien?
Thank you. I hope you have all had an opportunity to look at John Murphy's letter addressed to the mayor and council about the subject. He makes some salient points. And I think you are at the intersection of property rights and the historic ordinance intentions, but in a specific place. I will note that when I was on the Planning Commission and the City Council, I supported historic preservation in this community, and I had something to say about these statutes and ordinances, and I support historic preservation personally and professionally. But in this case, there are several points to consider which were not appreciated. First of all, and very importantly, this barn is not a protected structure. The house was registered, but the barn was not. The house is on Lot A. There are deeds which the city clerk has, and if it's necessary, I can ask her to put them up, but I believe you have seen them, and you know there's this distinct separation between the lots. The house was registered by Marilyn Kay, a legend here and a friend of mine, and one who supported and was part of the historic preservation movement in this city, but she did not register the barn on Lot B, and this is quite relevant. The barn is not protected. Now, the barn, as has been pointed out by the engineer you just heard from, who is an expert on historic buildings due to his work in Fredericksburg and other places, including Pennsylvania, in barns. But in Fredericksburg, he was dealing with Civil War properties. And this barn is not historic. Its appearance is not what it was before the tree fell on it. On its sides, its door, just to note the door, it's a door. The original barn had a sliding door, what you used to see on old barns. I was on my grandmother's farm many times in Iowa. It was a beautiful sliding door old barn. This is not what was there. So the barn has deteriorated, and you have information in your packet about the deterioration due to insect invasion, powder post beetles and termites and so on. It is structurally not sound at all, and it cannot be safely moved. It would have to be essentially demolished, taken apart. And the wood in it, you could probably punch a hole in some of that siding on that barn. I haven't tried that personally, but I represent that I did go and look at it. Now, this property has been on the market. There were offers for the property, but no one in the public who came and was interested in this property was interested in buying that barn, in moving the barn, or in purchasing those lots or any portion of them with the barn on it. It's not marketable as it is as a barn for anyone. Now, what you have, once upon a time, I could picture this as a Wright Brothers plane with historic interest. But then a tree crushed it. And if we put a plane there with a single propeller on it, with squirrels and rats nesting in the cockpit that was old and rusty with the landing gear completely sunk into the ground, it would not be worth saving. A plane, yes, but not of any historical interest. That's what you have. You don't have the Wright Brothers barn. You have a deteriorated pile of 1970s, 80s construction. The roof is not the same in appearance or condition or materials as it was. The cupola is not the same. The siding's not the same. The door is completely different. That was just redone with materials at hand. They did not try to preserve what was there when they rebuilt it after the tree fell on it and demolished it. I wonder if the clerk could put up the tree photo and the other photo with showing condition before it was effort made to repair it. The particular exhibits, I'd actually have to look. I know I believe they were in the original package and then resent in an email. But I don't want to take the council's time if you have the opportunity to see them in the packet.
I think you're talking about Exhibit 10A1-11.
Thank you very much.
Photos of barn damage 1970s. Is that what you're talking about?
There
Does that look right? That's on the screen now?
There's an email, November 20, from Karen Morrison.
Take a look at the screen, Mr. Bryan. Is that
All
it?
right. There you have a picture of the tree think there's a couple, and there is just part of it, the entire second floor, everything was gone. Also, the pillars in the barn and the floor are not the same. I might mention, if you were to go and look, you would see stone in the house, which is old, in the foundation, but you will not see any of that in the barn. If there was some in the barn, it's gone. It was just moved, taken away when they rebuilt the barn. Now, deterioration of a historic structure is not a ground, neglect by the owner is not a ground for sympathy, I suppose, under the ordinance. But remember, this applicant inherited this property. She wasn't in charge of it. She wasn't living there. And Marilyn Kay's husband died years ago, and she was living there alone. And then she became ill, and she ended up in a nursing home. So this was not, in fact, they rebuilt it, of course, but it was not a neglect by this applicant that caused deterioration. But the fundamental points are, it's not registered, it's not protected, and it is not reasonable to require it to be moved or saved. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. I mentioned we will, but from the moment, why don't we let you have a seat? We're going to go call for public comment, and then we'll open it up to council questions and comments. So unless there's unless there are further presentations to be made, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment. So if anyone wishes to speak, and Madam Clerk, I don't know if anyone has signed up to speak, but if they
We don't have anybody signed up to speak.
Okay. Anyone who would like to speak is certainly most welcome to. Seeing no one, at least at the present, this will be closed to the public and with council then for questions, comments, and possibly decision. So are there questions by council members? Yes, Ms. Hiscott.
Yes, I just wanted to start with one question about registered and protected to our city attorney, because I'm hearing conflicting opinions on whether it is registered and whether it's protected, which is obviously pretty germane point to whether or not we can or can't make such restrictions.
So in order to be protected, it would have to be registered. And in order to be registered, it has to be identified either as a structure, a residential structure that dates before 1910, which would not be applicable to the barn, or it can be a non-residential structure of any age that is on the list of the city's protected structures. And there's a process for getting on that list. And my understanding is that we are obtaining that list as we speak, that we have always treated the list that we have published as including the list that we have published says that the structure that says that 1011 Fowler Street is a protected registered proposition. Tonight, continue this hearing while those materials are being called back from storage.
I think that's a pretty key piece of information, and move to defer till we understand what is actually happening on the property, what's registered. And
Are you making a motion, or you just
I
support
am,
it?
but maybe you want to ask questions first.
So let's ask a question or two before we get to a motion. Let me just ask one question before I turn it over to you. So when might that be received? Do you have a rough estimate of when we might receive those materials, or you might receive those materials?
I will turn that over to the city manager and his staff to answer. They're the ones who have managed those boxes and have called the boxes back.
I will just note that the summary write-up that we've seen lists the barn as a contributing structure. And so that is the basis for the staff recommendation that it is covered under the ordinance. However, when these determinations were made, there was additional material. And so that's the material that's in storage that we're calling those boxes back so we can confirm kind of the full record on this property.
And do you have an idea when those might, once you call them, when they'll answer?
So, Mr. Garris?
Yes, so looking at all of our hard copy records, to call back probably 1 to 2 weeks to receive. And we're pulling everything we can find from Historical Commission that we have in hard copy. And to clarify the earlier question, the difficulty with the registry is that it is registered as historic as the property, but makes no differentiation between Lot A or Lot B in the registration of that, which is the cause of confusion.
And
When-
if I,
when-
oh, go ahead, sorry.
So when was the lot subdivided? Do you know?
I'm showing an inventory card.
Is that from the,
Don't know if you have. I'm just asking. Because this is, to me, doesn't show anything but the house.
So no matter what that shows, I mean, I don't know if that's essentially maybe some evidence we have not all seen, certainly the city attorney hasn't seen yet. I think, I don't know what you've shown just now, but I guess I would support if there are additional materials you're waiting to receive, not just a copy of a card, that it may be prudent to consider a motion to defer this to receive the full transcript, the full record. But before we get to that, why don't we see what other questions council members such as Councilwoman Conley has right now?
I just have a couple questions about things that we've heard tonight. One is, how could the HARB have made this decision without all the materials? That they were tasked with making a decision and the materials remain in storage. That's really concerning to me. And the second one is, and this is to HARB, we have an engineer who says that this structure is not movable, not usable, and yet not savable, as he just explained to us, and yet in your decision, you say that it is. So I'm just wondering, we're getting conflicting evidence here, and I'm just wondering, how do we balance that? Can you explain how you didn't listen to what the engineer had to say, or didn't take what the engineer had to say into consideration in the same way as the applicant has?
I would only say that in our experience, looking at historic structures and buildings at different levels of deterioration, there are different opinions for whether or not something can be salvaged, saved, moved, and renovated. And it speaks somewhat to the motivation as well. Our charge as members of HARB is preservation, not preservation at any cost, but preservation based on the structures that we have in the City of Falls Church. We also do have in the ordinance a lot of language about demolition by neglect. And we certainly would feel that this structure has been demolished by neglect. It has been left to deteriorate without adequate maintenance. The ordinance talks about the maintenance of structures. That's not an opinion. But even when a structure gets to be in a deteriorated state, it can still be, in our opinion, saved. So it's a difference of opinion between one engineer and one architect, one applicant and one board. And that does make your decision more difficult.
Right. Mr. O'Connor just said that the current applicant did not neglect the structure. They just inherited the structure. The previous owner is if you're going to call it demolition by neglect, was the one who did that or didn't take care of it in the way that, so how does this fall on the current applicant?
It's our understanding that it was presented to us as a single ownership over the past 50 years. So this is the first time it's been separated to new owner and previous owner. So we're confused by that discussion.
When did, just interject since it's salient, when did the current owner take title? Mr. O'Connor?
This was after Marilyn passed away.
So was that past 5 years or so? Something
This year.
Oh, this year? Oh, God. I'm just, okay.
Let me try to answer. Marilyn Kay passed away this year,
Okay.
2023.
Okay. So the current owner's just taken title through inheritance in the past months, let's say, or at least a year.
I have the date.
Sir, can you speak into the mic so we get the recording? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
My memory's refreshed. I just looked at her obit recently. It's February this year that she died.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
All right. Other questions? Did you have more?
I do, but other people can ask.
All right, Mr. Snyder?
Thanks. I'd like to speak, I'd like to ask the HARB representative to come forward again, please. Charlie?
Mr. Moore?
Thanks. The petitioner alleges that the property has been so changed over time that it's no longer an historic structure. Does HARB have an opinion about that?
We, at the third meeting, we were presented during that meeting a photograph of the building with a tree on it. That had never been presented to the board until the final meeting. So until that point, we were not aware that there had ever been any damage to the building. The photograph that you saw tonight showed the tree had hit the building. Much of the building was still intact. It's been represented tonight that the building was demolished, destroyed, which it wasn't. One thing that I think is germane is that the owner, this is pre-ordinance. This is in the 70s. The ordinance was 84. The owner took it upon themselves to renovate the building because they had a love of historic architecture and history and restored the building back to its original character with a similar roof pitch, with similar pieces, with similar siding. So within the renovation and restoration world, materials have to be new. You don't go out and buy siding from a 100-year-old building. It's still a historic building, even though it was renovated. And so we see it as such, and the ordinance supports that. So we on the HARB board were guided by our ordinance, and that's what the ordinance said.
Thank you. Second question I have for you, thanks for coming up. The issue of moving. Now, Mr. Moore, you are an architect and you're familiar with historic properties over many years. You've renovated many of them. So what's your opinion about moving the structure, or rather HARB's opinion, because you're here as a representative of HARB?
In 1996, Historic Falls Church, Inc. came before the city to protect the Proctor House in the 100 block of East Broad Street that had been, the raising of that house had been denied by HARB and went to Council for Appeal. Council didn't uphold HARB's denial of raising, but HFC, Historic Falls Church, Inc., worked with the developer and got possession of the house, the Proctor House, and worked with the city to find a place to move it. And we moved it 2 blocks east on Broad Street to its current site at Frady Park. Lots of people, the experts, the engineers, said we couldn't do it. You can't do it. You're never going to be able to move it. It'll fall apart. And we did it. It was moved on a Sunday morning. It made the morning news shows in D.C., and that house is still a part of our scene. So I'm much more of the attitude of figuring out how to do things instead of figuring out how not to do things. And we've got few of these buildings left. We have an ordinance. HARB is trying to adhere to the ordinance. And until we're told otherwise, we will continue to abide by the law and the language of the ordinance.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Could I ask Mr. Freeland to come back up, please? Thank you for joining us tonight, sir. So you have visited the site as well. So in your professional opinion, so this relates to criteria 1, where we're supposed to determine whether there's architectural or historic interest. In light of the fact that the barn was rebuilt or repaired in 1970, in your professional opinion, what percentage is kind of from 1970s era and what percentage is in the 1890s?
I would say probably 70% of that is from the 1970s construction. When you're looking at that picture, you're seeing the facade, but if you go in and get into the nuts and bolts of that structure, I mean, all the floor members have been modified. There's, concrete blocks for foundations. The whole roof system was replaced, not just what they show here. I believe that whole roof structure was replaced. I didn't really get a very good look up there because I wasn't going up those steps because that probably wouldn't have ended well. But so I would say probably 70% of that has been rebuilt, if not more. Great. And, saving, I just have a thought, an opinion, saving structures, it's always good to try, but you run into the point where it's just not fiscally responsible and it puts a burden on private property owners to have to address these things out of their own pocket. And, it can be quite a struggle to come up with the funds to do that. I just, in summary of what I think, I just don't think there's enough history there. Because it was built in 1890 does not make that structure historical, other than a date. If that were the case, there probably wouldn't be every house in Old Town Alexandria and every house in Fredericksburg would be historically relevant. So, there's a lot more that goes into that than just the date of construction, especially when it's been wiped out pretty much by an accident.
Great, thank you. Questions for Mr. O'Connor, please. So that is one structural engineer. I believe from the staff report and the attachments I read that, is it one or two other structural engineers also had the same assessment?
Yes.
That it was not movable or salvageable and unsafe?
No, and I would argue here that the HRB did not consider the costs. They were presented in the last meeting with cost information, and they really ignored that, and I don't think that's reasonable.
So that's a good segue, because that was my next question. So I looked at the cost estimates. I think in one record I saw that it was 175, another said it was 75, and then I read the HARB letter, which thank you to the members of the HARB for writing that very detailed letter to us, that they did not take into consideration the most recent letter because it was $90,000 more than the original estimate. Could you give some more context on why the numbers jumped up so much, obviously other than inflation?
Well, in the staff report, it mentions the costs, and the applicant presented that, and I believe orally presented that they had a $73,000 estimate to make it, to even try to get it in a position to move it. The plain fact is, this can't be safely moved. It would have to be demolished and then moved in that fashion, frankly. And it would be it is a liability now. It's unsafe for any children who come around there. And it's not going to be made safe for any reasonable sum of money. But again, it is not historic and it's not protected.
Got it.
The inventory card was what I was showing staff.
So that's actually my next question, Mr. O'Connor. So could I make sure I understand the order of events? If staff has, maybe this is a question for Mr. Garris. The order of events. So what was the date of the subdivision, and is that when we normally assign lot numbers at the subdivision date? And was that before or after the property was sold to the K's, when the deed was briefly shown up on the screen, which I don't think is in our staff report?
Yes, so the subdivision in 1968 was the creation of Lot A and B, which the created Lot B did not have a new address. They were both considered 1011 Fowler Street.
But do we give them unique tax IDs and lot numbers?
We have different, we have different RPC numbers for those lots.
And that is when they are signed, is when that subdivision happens?
Yes.
So even though they retained one address, at that point, we gave them 2 lot numbers, RPC numbers, tax parcel IDs, whatever we called them. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so that was 1968. And when, was that before or after the property was sold to the K? So the deed that was shown previously up on the screen, because I can't find that online.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't seen that.
Does anyone else know?
Was that the?
That was before they bought it. They bought the property, the
Can-
residence in 1970.
Can you speak in the microphone, please?
Introduce yourself.
Good evening. Sorry, Daniel Clinton. Yes, the lots were subdivided in 1968. 2 separate RPC numbers. The K's bought it in 1970, the residence, and 1972, the Lot B. So 2 different actual dates that they bought the 2 separate lots with 2 separate parcel numbers, and only the parcel number with the residence is on the registered historic registry that the city has.
So to my mind, I think there's a lot of information here that it appears to be either new or has not been fully considered either by, materials for the city council itself, but maybe also by the HARB. And I don't know if the representative from the HARB could come forward again. I just want to ask you directly, if I could, are you hearing information now that you did not either were not aware of or was not presented to you at the time you made your decision?
It was our understanding that because it was one address, it was one lot. So if that's not the case, we would love to hear any clarification of that information.
And so we're waiting for clarification for that. So we're going to wait till the file, the record, full record, not just the card, but the rest of the city records comes, and then our city attorney will be able to provide additional guidance as to at least what staff believes to be the correct, registration per se of that. I wonder, though, depending on what turns up, whether in fact there's additional information you all should be considering that you did not have before when you made your original determination, whether that's because estimates changed, you didn't have all the estimates, whatever it might be. I'm hearing today a fair amount of information that, well, if this was said, we didn't see this, and it seems like there's information, the full information was not available to your body at the time you rendered your decision. And I wonder, at least to my colleagues, whether this is something we may want to consider remanding back to the HARB to make a full determination or a complete determination once we have full information from our files and other information that was presented tonight that may not have been fully presented and understood by your body. So it's not really a question for you, it's more a statement, and it's a question for my colleagues here. But anyway, I'm talking out loud and wonder if...
Mayor, I had a few more questions, sorry.
We'll get to those in just a second, but I wonder if others have a similar kind of understanding or feeling about this. At least let's think about that as we go forward with our questions, but go forward with the rest of your questions.
All right, thank you. So I was trying to just make sure I had the facts again down. So 1968, it was subdivided. 1970, it was sold to the Ks. When was it registered historic, Lot A only? 1985. And what we're waiting for is, even though we have this, the Virginia Department of Historical Resources card, we're waiting for kind of our internal report on how the property might have been registered. But I guess a legal question maybe for the city attorney is, do we use our internal kind of records, or is this statewide record the official source of what's historic, I guess?
Our local record would dictate whether a property or a structure is subject to the historic corridor regulations.
Okay, so this VDHR card is not sufficient?
It is not sufficient.
Okay. One more question.
Can we repeat that?
Yeah,
for the
if you
record?
could just hold your thoughts for a moment. Let's get through our questions.
I'm quiet until I'm asked.
I know, well, you're up there, though. It looks like you're poised to strike. I know, that makes me nervous.
Thank you. So that's helpful to understand the order of events. I guess another question I would have, maybe for the city attorney, so if we do decide to either remand this or at least continue the hearing, is how much does precedence matter for this? Does the council need to take into fact any historical precedents on cases similar to this in looking at this decision?
Well, the first rule is to follow the criteria that are given in the ordinance and to document the findings and the evidence for those findings, and explain why a preponderance of the evidence supports those findings. If you've done that, there shouldn't be much inconsistency with precedents, but I will dig for, we received one case today through an email from a resident with a case that was similar, and I also received a file from our zoning administrator from 2013 with a case that was similar. So I will check just to make sure there aren't any gross inconsistencies, but the first rule is to follow the ordinance procedure and arrive at a conclusion.
Great. Well, I think I agree with the mayor that the most important facts right now is whether even this property is historic, given that it is actually two separate lots, and maybe that is the information we need to all wait for first. So, thank you.
So, Mr. Duncan?
Just one question. It's a process question, really. I'm just trying to understand the difference between a continuation of the current activity that we're engaged in here and a remanding to the HARB. I mean, just listening as a former journalist, folks here have their jobs and they're doing each their jobs as they see fit. And, I'm not sure that the battle lines are going to change that much if we remand it, but seems to me that the discussion mostly centers on information that we're short here on council. If we get that information, we should be able to make a determination, it sounds to me like. So unless there's distinction between remanding and continuing, I would hold out some hope that we might be able to continue it to one of our two, well, I guess we have one full meeting in December, and council would be able to have all the information it needs at hand to make the decision. Just my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you look at the ordinance, which is it 48.796 or dash 4096? Can we put that on the screen? Do we even have, is that in the staff report? I imagine it is. I looked at it numerous times, but I think one aspect of the ordinance says specifically if there's new evidence provided that, in fact, I believe we remand it. That's sort of the charge of the ordinance, if recollection serves correct, but I don't have the ordinance in front of me.
Right, it gives you the option to remand if you get significant new evidence. It says you may remand.
Got it.
May or you shall?
May.
Right, and what is significant mean? I mean, what I've heard tonight is not, dispositive, but it's the information that we're waiting for is basically just certification of some of the things that I think we've heard tonight. So anyway, I'm trying to get this off people's plates before the holidays. And, I remember the Proctor House discussion. I was there for that. It was a extremely controversial matter to move that house. And, my own mother-in-law was opposed to it because it took land out of Frady Park and, big, long, typical Falls Church story. And I would hate to see us go down that road for a structure, which, the Proctor House at least was truly a significant historic structure. Not really sure this structure meets that standard. And I would just hope that we could, move along with this.
So, Mr. Snyder, do you have a comment?
Sure, thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. So, I do think this has been very fruitful exchange of information. I think it will help us when we ultimately have to decide this. What I do know is that the minute that we vote to reject the HARB decision, that structure is potentially gone, which means another piece of history of Falls Church is gone and it won't come back. That's why I urge a very careful continued review of this. I think the best approach is to remand to HARB, give them an opportunity. Hopefully there'll be some exchange based upon this new information. We created HARB. We appointed their representatives. They've been given a significant responsibility. They've carried it out so far, and I'd like to see them make a recommendation. I would also like to see the potential for some way to preserve this barn. But I will say that that's an option that's immediately gone the minute that we vote reject the Harb decision, and that's why I would urge a cautious approach, especially in view of the inconsistency of some fundamental evidence at this point. Thanks.
Swan?
I really encourage all of council to visit this property. Mayor Beth and I went on Saturday, and it is very important to see it off of the pictures and actually visually with your own eyes. I am of the position to not remand to Harb. I do believe that we have some key pieces of information that we do need before we make a decision, and I think we need that present. We need some input from our legal counsel, but we have to keep in mind that we have put people on pause, right? So we've got a historic structure that is on pause. We've got, purchases that are on hold. Part of running just efficient government is just respecting what we're doing to support the citizens and making sure we're aware of the impacts on all sides. So I would love to hear other council members' opinions, but I think we as council should vote pending this new information, put this back on the docket as soon as we can in December, once we get this information, pull the files, and have deliberations with this body. Thoughts?
Other comments, other thoughts?
I think I support the drift of that suggestion. Language would be to the end of asking staff to bring us all pertinent information by the time of the next work session, and a continuation to the December 11th council meeting, giving the option still at that meeting to continue it further or remand it or whatever. But I mean, I'm struck by the part of government's job is to deliver its services and activities in an efficient manner. There are many people hanging on this, both sides. So I think I would support Ms. Leon's gist.
Any other comments?
I'll third that.
Yeah, I would agree with Ms. Leon, Mr. Duncan, and Ms. Hardy. I'm very concerned, though, if we look at line 224 and 225 of the staff report, where staff say that the measures Harb used to make determinations to deny the requests to raise the barn were not contrary to law, and its decision was supported by thorough evidence and reasoning. But we are now hearing we did not have thorough evidence and reasoning for Harb to be able to make that decision. So that's really concerning to me because, as Ms. Leon said, we have people whose projects are put on hold. We have citizens that are trying to actually renovate and save the historic house, which is suffering. So the fact that this has gotten this far along and we don't have all the evidence out of storage and we haven't, that's really concerning to me. So one thing I would like to do, if we decide to delay this and not vote this evening, is to provide the homeowner with some kind of tax deferral, because there's a tax payment due December 5th, and that's all held up in this process. So I think it would be helpful if we're going to hold off and wait for further evidence that we could have gotten any time in the last 6 months, we should extend that offer to the owner, that tax payment will not be due December 5th until we figure out exactly what's going on with the situation.
If I could just note, in defense of the reasoning, it is our practice that when there's a property that has contributing structures that are listed, that they are treated as historic structures. And so we have gone with that precedent. The barn is specifically named as a contributing structure. So I don't think extending the protections to the barn is something that is a strange thing for staff to recommend that we do. I would just note that for the record. We also acknowledge that the registration notes Lot 1A and even gives the square footage, which is not inclusive of Lot B. And so there's a contradiction there. But in the interest of historic preservation and in the interest of, the view, the sort of the purposes of the HCC, I do think that was an appropriate determination. But we do want to get the full record of it. There could be in those boxes specific mention of the barn. There could have been specific exemptions of the barn that kind of go beyond that broader precedent and that sort of that general practice that we've adhered to. So I would just note that in response to the comments as well.
And then just...
Yes.
So then further, once we do get this information, a lot of those 5 criteria are very subjective, as someone said, that, what is a reasonable cost? A reasonable cost is different to a wealthy person who's buying and renovating this house than to someone who inherited it and may not. So what's a reasonable cost? So we do have to go through those 5 things, no matter what this piece of paper says, whether the barn was deemed historic or not, to say, is there a public benefit? Is it structurally sound? All those kind of questions. Because now we have 2 sets of experts. We have an engineer and we have architects who are saying different things. So
And that's the difficulty I think that the HARB encounters with every application is historic preservation is expensive, it's difficult, and sometimes it's inconvenient. And that's something that they confront, I think, probably with every application. And
Excuse me, if I may interject. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I heard several council members express an interest in continuing. I do have a motion typed up, and I have several copies. I'll just pass them along if that is in fact the motion you'd like to make. I've also heard motions to remand mentioned, so of course that's at your discretion, but this language might help.
It is on the screen too.
So never mind. My old-fashioned paper.
Mr. Mayor, may I just comment?
Briefly, yes.
I don't want to interrupt the flow, but the applicant would prefer not a remand. The applicant is asking the council to make the decision. And I would mention there is some precedent in interpretation of the ordinance involving a dispute with the Columbia Baptist Church and a house. And the house was, after the court gave permission, demolished against the wishes of the city. The point is that you have to be reasonable in considering the property owner's rights. That's part of the job as you have elected officials here and legislative power. I thank you. I'll answer any questions if there are any. I just want to make sure it's clear there are 2 lots, and on the register it shows 22,000 for the historic lot size when that was Lot A only. The other thing I would like to do is thank the mayor and Phil Hannum for the years of service they've given this community and the many, many hours. And we thank their families also who have sacrificed when they have not been home.
I think my wife was happy to have me out of the house, but anyway, thank you very much. All right, look, let's...
I appreciate this. Mr. Mayor, can I just ask one other lawyer question?
Yeah.
So there have been a couple of references to, alternative use for the land on which this structure sits. Are we allowed, Ms. City Attorney, to take that into consideration, or is that fenced off from our discussions here? In other words, one of the arguments is that the house itself is clearly historic and wants to be improved, and resources are needed to do that, and this is related to that. In a layman's world, it's obviously related. Is it within the metes and bounds of council's decision on this matter to take that into consideration?
Well, council is expressly permitted under the ordinance to take into consideration the circumstances. I suppose that could be one of the circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have a motion?
I move that City Council continue this public hearing to Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7:30 PM in the City Hall Council Chambers for the purpose of continuing the council's consideration of the appeal of the Harb's denial to raise a protected structure located at 1011 Fowler Street.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Can I have an amendment to that?
Yes.
I'd just like to amend that council directs staff to allow the property taxes on this property that are due December 5th to not be paid until after the decision is made.
I don't think that would be legally permissible. I have looked into that issue in the past, not recently, but there are, the city doesn't have a lot of leeway in how it administers its tax requirements of its citizens, and making individual exemptions to individual property owners, I think, is dangerous and risky.
All right. I would also note, just for the record, that the two council members-elect are in the audience. If for some reason this continues on, they are here hearing all the evidence as well. Let's go ahead and take the vote, Madam Clerk.
So did the motion for an amendment die?
Did you wish to pursue it or not wish to pursue it?
The attorney says we can't do it. It just seems really unfair to me that we're going to delay this, and that if all this money is waiting to change hands so that the property can be saved, there's also a tax liability there that we're holding up. So it seems to me that we do bear some responsibility for that, and it is an odd situation that has not ever showed up in the 10 years that I've done this. So, but you are the attorney, I'm not. So I just wish there was a way to solve that temporarily. If we can continue this, we can continue the tax bill.
All right, so your motion, though, all right.
Take it off
So we
the
have a
table.
motion on the table. It's been seconded, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes?
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council.
All right, we'll see you all shortly. Thank you all for coming out.
Can I make a request of staff? So given that some of us also want to visit the barn, and I think the city attorney recommends doing it as one group if possible, and therefore needing to advertise as a public meeting, could we get that on the schedule between now and December 11th?
I believe we can, and we would notice it as a public meeting.
Speaking of notice, we're running up tight against notification deadlines. Let's make sure that we get whatever proper notice of this action on the 11th advertised in the newspaper forthwith.
Well, because this public hearing was not closed but continued to December 11th, we don't need to advertise it. We effectively advertised it here tonight to a specific date, time, and place through your adopted motion.
Okay.
As to the tour, we would need to know some available times from council, unless you want to hold the tour in on December 11th before the meeting.
No, it's before the reception.
We have
No,
we
you
have
gotta
a
go.
pre-meeting.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure the notification thing was straight and legal. That's good.
We will find out a convenient time for everybody and for the homeowner.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next item, Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have TR 23-32, resolution to approve FY 2024 funding recommendations for the Arts and Cultural Grants and Virginia Commission for the Arts, VCA, Local Challenge Grant submission.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. We have Amy Youngs, who's participating virtually for this meeting, and she can provide a staff report on this. I will note that there is one less grant award that relative to what you saw at work session, and that is due to the eligibility requirements prompted in some respects by the council to relook at those and make sure that those have been applied. And so, Ms. Youngs, if you could provide the staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to present this to you this evening. So we do have the FY24 Arts and Culture grant for you. The highlighted information is what has changed since you saw it in your work session. The questions were around criteria, so the criteria will be there. I believe that's on page 2. If you scroll down, you'll notice that it is that you do have to be a city address. You have to have at least 75% of your programming within the city. And that was originally established back in, I believe, about 2013 when this whole program came together. It was initially put together by the Little City Catch Foundation. They were originally the administrators of this program. Staff took over the organization of it in about 2016, 2017 for FY 2017. In FY20, we made some changes and we did bring that to council in the fall of 2019. The biggest change that we made there was that for the operations grants, we won't award more than 25% of your total operating budget. So that is some of the additional information on the criteria that you all had asked about. As Mr. Shields noted, we did take out the Jasper Justice Award. That was in the amount of $1,750 after realizing that they are indeed not located in the City of Falls Church and were ineligible. We have since notified them that they are not eligible. So there is funding in the amount of $1,750 that is not allocated on here. Our recommendation is that it just be carried over to the next grant cycle rather than trying to divvy it out. The grant awards are the dollar amounts are decided on by the grant review committee. That grant review committee is 3 individuals that have a vested interest in arts and culture in the community, but no direct ties to any of the organizations that apply. And when they do decide which organization is getting which dollar amounts, it's not cut and dry as to like an 80% or a 90% there. So taking that $1,750 and kind of deciding who got it was not something that really staff were able to do. So our recommendation is that it gets carried over. And then I am here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Small amount, wouldn't we just allocate it to an existing foundation? Or is there another one that's located in the city that could get that?
Part of it is, part of it is kind of the integrity of the grant program. It's intended to be a competitive program and to kind of take away I'll add. So the staff report was due last Wednesday, and it wasn't until last Wednesday that it was realized. So it was really had we had more time, we probably could have gone back to the grant review committee and said, hey, there's $1,750 left. Can you allocate it? And, we'll update the staff report. There wasn't going to be enough time to do that. So we really do care about the integrity of this program. It has grown leaps and bounds since it started in 2013. It's gotten so much more organized, and the grant awardees really appreciate the program. They've gotten so much better at turning in their paperwork. And I would hate to just pick a dollar amount and not go it through competitively.
I think there's just weighing the pros and cons of that. That's all. For $1,750, and I support maintaining integrity in the program. But what you've got on the list are perfectly great organizations that I wouldn't have any issues dividing that by 6 and giving each of them an extra $291. I don't see that as a violation of integrity. I mean, that's the amount we're talking about, right? $750 divided by 6. So that way it's a clean accounting period, and you're you're supporting those organizations locally. It's just the materiality of that and how you balance supporting the notion of integrity. So you can have integrity and still allocate is where I'm asking you to consider it. I just, carrying $1,750 on the books until next year, you could. It just, there's such a need for money now, just given inflation. It just seems there's also basis to also just dole it out equally. Open to other council member thoughts on that.
I'd support that approach.
I like that idea.
I agree.
I do too.
Appreciating staff's concern for the integrity of the program, and we understand that, and ideally in another world, you'd open it all back up for competition and blah, 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 but we're not going to do that. We're going to give that $300 to all the others, and each of which asked for more than we were able to give them anyway, I think.
That's what I was going to say. It doesn't raise even to the level of what they originally requested.
Correct, yeah. So we're happy if council makes that action.
A motion to make that change.
Second.
Did we make a motion? I didn't hear one.
Motion to make
Caroline,
the
why don't you
change
make
to
that?
reallocate the $1,750 equally amongst all applicants so that we deploy all dollars this year.
Well, where do you use?
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Can we also adopt the resolution?
So we'll
TR
adopt the
20.
resolution, amending it maybe, or,
Beth had a question.
I'm sorry, you'd have a question?
I do.
All right,
What-
okay, go
Did I
ahead.
miss it? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead and ask your question.
My question, Ms. Youngs, and I've, been involved in this for a lot of years along with you, and I know that there's always new organizations, different people applying. I guess my concern with the Little City Concerts is that it's this brand new organization that was created this summer, almost, and we're giving them the most money of anyone. They don't have a track record. I know the Grants Review Committee went through it all, must have found reason why they were reliable. I just would, I'm not going to not vote for them, but I would raise that flag of, did they really do due diligence to make sure that this is an organization that's going to be around for a while, contributing to Falls Church? The nonprofit organizations they're giving to are not in Falls Church, and while the founder may live in Falls Church and seems to be an amazing composer and musician, so they could be really wonderful. I question that large amount of money was given to an organization that's really just starting out in Falls Church. But that's just sort of a statement out there for future reference.
Other comments? Ms. Hardy?
I had a question. Is the Grants Review Committee staff or residents, or who makes up the Grants Review Committee?
This year, they are all residents. That's not a requirement. They just have to have knowledge of grant programs and interest in the Falls Church arts community, arts and culture community, and no ties to any of the applying organizations. So none of them are staff. It's a lot of repeaters. It's kind of a core group that has done it several years with a little bit of variation.
How do they get on? Do they apply? Do they go through staff?
So that was part of when we took, so it was originally managed by the Little City Catch Foundation. They nominated the individuals to serve. When staff took over the management of this program back in about 2017, I believe, it was done so with the understanding that we would kind of coordinate with the Little City Catch Foundation on who sits on that committee. It's been using the folks from the past, unless I think the Little City Catch Foundation comes to us with other recommendations or complaints about the folks on the board, on the committee.
Thank you. Maybe offline we can talk more about that process and the makeup of the folks. Thanks.
Sure.
Any other comments? Mr. Snyder?
Yeah, just for the record, do each and every one of the recipients listed here meet the criteria, including the location of the organization in the city?
And that's my understanding, yes. I did check one of them today also to make sure. And there's a checklist on the front of their applications, and they were all checked off.
Did we verify that? Amy, we did verify that, though, right? We didn't just depend on a check.
There's addresses listed on them. I'm not personally involved in that process, but I would think that would hope that our staff would do that. But
We can confirm.
if there's concern, we can. Yes, that's a good point. Also, it's a reimbursement grant.
We will confirm that as we administer the grant dollars, that they have accurately filled out the application form and meet the criteria.
I
And
support.
it's a reimbursement grant.
Yes.
So they can't,
What was
even if
that,
they're a new
Dave?
organization, it has a reimbursement grant, they can't. You know, it's not like they're taking $4,500 and going out and spending it, and we don't know what's happening. They have to
Report it.
apply for reimbursement.
Yeah.
Yes, this is thank you, Mr. Shields. There's a grant agreement that goes in place once, if this is adopted as presented. City staff do a grant agreement with all these individuals. It's reimbursement only, and then that will all get confirmed.
For Mr. Snyder's that question and making sure that it stays in the city. Yep.
Are there any other questions or comments? Maybe you could make your motion again, if you so choose, with the change that you want in the actual body of the motion. In other words, what's it? Yeah.
Motion to adopt TR 23-32 with the change of allocating $1,750 evenly amongst all 6 applicants to use all funds this year.
All right. Let's go ahead. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shonsiska?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see what the next item is.
Thank you.
Next item is TR 23-36, resolution requesting that the General Assembly amend Section 4.14 appointments of the Charter of the City of Falls Church to require that appointed members to city boards and commissions be at least 18 years of age and residents of the city, and removing the requirement they be qualified voters of the city.
Okay, before we go through this, and I think we all know about this one, so I don't think we need an extensive presentation. Let's take a 5-minute break after this item before we get to the following one. But a quick presentation, Ms. Messner.
Certainly. For the charter amendment TR 2336, as the city clerk read it, there's been no changes to this item as discussed at the work session last week. Staff's recommendation is for you to schedule a public hearing and action for December 11th and advertise the same according to law. Glad to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Any questions, any comments?
Move to schedule a public hearing and action on TR 23-36 for December 11th, 2023, and advertise the same according to law.
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shonsiska?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's take a short recess, and we'll come back and bang this out the rest of the meeting.
2-minute break.
So our next item is TR 23-35, resolution adopting the City of Falls Church 2024 legislative program.
All right, Ms. Mester.
Mayor and council, thank you. This is the annual opportunity to set your priorities as we go into the 2024 legislative program. The program that's presented to you this evening, of course, was developed by Council's Legislative Committee, and I've incorporated the feedback and comments from the work session last week. So I will focus on just what's changed from the work session. So starting on line 19 of the staff report, you'll see in gray highlights, which will be the pattern throughout the staff report, the new materials with council's focus on K-12 education and funding for public schools, maximizing authority for our public safety tools, such as speed cameras, and of course, the environmental local authority in particular was on the banning of gas leaf blowers that had been brought up by ESC and Urban Forestry and adopted in your Community Energy Action Plan. The comments that we had on the work session from the Urban Forestry and the draft school board were not in your council packet at the time last week because of just timing of them being delivered. They've now been incorporated into your legislative program as additional public comment. And as you heard from the city clerk's report of written public comments earlier, you have received comments predominantly in support of the gas leaf blower ban and the increasing of speed cameras. But there were also those that spoke of concern and opposition to those being in your legislative program. They are, however, included in the legislative program as supporting those. Moving to line 250, this is related to K-12 public education funding. I wanted to flag the addition of the specific opposition to diverting any state funds to public schools, in particular private lab schools. This is consistent with the VML position, but we wanted to make sure it was clarified based on your work session discussion. And then moving to line 510, I wanted to highlight the specific call out for the ban on gas leaf blowers as discussed, as well as increasing incentives for EVs and chargers. And that is consistent also then with the position in line 517. On line 546, that's where I've now included the Falls Church City Public Schools legislative position, which was provided to us in draft form. The school board will adopt it officially tomorrow. There's not anticipating any major changes, but I was asked to flag that it is currently still draft. The school board has a new legislative liaison this year because Lila Wise has retired, and so I look forward to working with Peter Finnehan, who we've communicated and coordinated with so far. And line 567 is the acknowledgement of the urban forestry. Comments are now incorporated by reference. And of course, this legislative program includes the charter amendment, which was the resolution you just adopted. And so with that, Mayor, I'd be glad to hear any comments from your legislative committee, answer any questions, and the request is adoption of TR 23-35.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for that thorough staff report and all the fine work you've done throughout the year to advance our city's interest down in Richmond. Let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Ms. Hiscott.
Thank you. I would like to make one addition that I was remiss since I was not in person the last couple of meetings, that the ESC had asked to bring forward in addition. It's great to talk about the leaf blowers and the EV chargers, but we also wanted to ask for inclusion to reference in lines 25 and 26 after the leaf blowers, asking for additional local authority to adopt more energy-efficient building codes. So I'd like to move to adopt this with an addition in line 2520, well, I guess it's 20, yeah, 26, 25, 26, 27, to adopt more energy-efficient building codes. And again, for all of these issues, it's local authority to make these decisions. By us agreeing to this legislative package, we're not saying, affirmatively that we're banning anything or we're taking all of these. It gives us local authority to then have the discussion. So I know we heard opposing positions on leaf blowers, for instance, but putting this in our legislative package would give us the opportunity to making that decision at a local level. And that's what we'd like to do as well for energy efficient building codes. This ties back into the Community Energy and Action Plan that we've been working hard to enlist. And Cindy, I apologize, I'm bringing it forward at the dais, but I had been asked to do that, and I was remiss in getting that to you sooner.
Sure, no problem. And I think we can address that, Mayor, if I may note that attachment 5 is the full ESC agenda priorities, which include the state climate laws and the building codes and transportation, as well as the gas blowers. And in the resolution on...
Okay, so it's already referenced.
Lines, and then now therefore it be... Yes, on line 154, we adopt by reference the ESC's recommendation. So in your legal resolution, I think we are able to accommodate that.
Okay, so it doesn't
Mrs.
need to
Scott,
have
for
any
you.
addition. It's included by reference to
and
that.
then
Okay,
and then
thank
we
you.
can just make sure that it's called out as I work in Richmond.
Thank you.
If that works for you, we can accommodate
She
it that
solved it
way.
before we even had to.
That's right. That's right. Are there other comments or questions?
I did have one. Sorry, when I was soliciting input on this, I saw that I had missed one. So one was actually from members of Bike Falls Church about what's called the safety stop or the Idaho stop, and treating stop signs as yield for bikes and then red lights as actual stops. Has there been discussion with the CACT on this? Is it something, there was a bill last year that died in committee. And so I think the note to me referenced, it was Senate Bill 1293, which was sponsored by, I think, Senator Deeds. So I'm not sure if there's going to be plans to reintroduce that this year, but that's something that at least Bike Falls Church and potentially the CACT would support again.
Yeah, I did not get a formal position statement from the CACT this year. We do have sort of broad positions related to public safety and crosswalks and street safety. Bills are just now getting submitted, so we don't know all of those. But they're on going to line 482 first, which is under street safety. I will note that it is a broad statement that says support legislation that would enable the city to locally implement additional street safety tools. And I think the points that you're calling out could fit under that, as well as moving back up, thank you, Sophie, to line 459, which is under pedestrian safety and crosswalk. We continue to support existing laws to improve the clarity of what drivers and pedestrians' responsibilities are, as well as eliminating confusion on roads and crosswalks for bicycle safeties. The speed camera piece comes up there, and any other tool to increase safety. So I believe it would be broad enough to capture that, and then we could track bills that if it gets reintroduced this year. I'm glad to also tweak that if council has a recommendation.
I do read that it is supported by the NHTSA to kind of reduce conflicts between drivers and pedestrians. So it's not like just some new crazy idea. This is something that has been proven and is supported by the experts. Another one, I think, as we were bill tracking is SB 847, which actually allows bicyclists to proceed during LPIs in the crosswalks. So treating them also as like a more vulnerable user of the streets, like a pedestrian versus treating them like a car. So that's one I personally would support as well. So if I guess the rest of council would support it, I guess I would recommend calling out the safety stop, given that there's a terminology for it that I think is valuable.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I read the NHTSA study. It's like 1.5 pages. And a lot of it's, well, we want to encourage biking, and this is a way to do that. On the other hand, if you're driving a car and you're approaching an intersection, you see pedestrians, but a bicyclist could zoom right past you when you're making a right-hand turn, and therefore hitting the bicycle. And it doesn't much matter what the facts were, the car driver is going to be held responsible. The only reason why I raise this scenario is to say I'm not entirely comfortable with this. I don't have any problem with studying it. But I think there's a serious issue with regard to the ability of car drivers to respond. And it furthermore complicates who does what at a red light, who does what at a stop sign. And that complexity and confusion can create accidents as well. I guess what I'd like is to check more with CACT. I'd like to check with the police chief because they're enforcing the laws, and there are local safety experts, if you will. So I don't have any problem including it as a concept to study, but I'm a little reluctant to endorse it without some more work.
Other thoughts? Are there other changes people want? Ms. Leon?
It's a small, I think we made a change, rightfully so, when Mayor Beth mentioned that we wanted to keep K through 12 money in the public education system and not go to non-public. I think the question is, do we benefit by adding specificity to say pre-K through 12, not just K through 12? Thoughts on that, Cindy? Because we have a public pre-K through 12.
A lot of times the K-12, it's labeled K-12, but it includes preschool, but it doesn't ever hurt to ensure that we're clear on the intent and the messaging, so.
I think it adds
easy
clarity and
enough
we
to
obviously
accommodate.
have Jesse Thackeray. that
Yeah, we do, and I
are
just,
advocating.
that's what I was thinking. I was glad to see the change made. I think the important one is to make sure that it doesn't go into non-public and stays in public. If that's the case, if you could make that change, that'd be great.
Are there other comments? Is there a way to
Mayor?
reconcile what Letty's asked for and what Dave's comment is? I don't know if there's a way to reconcile that.
I think like the building codes one, I think it's just having local authority. And clearly, if we were to adopt something, we would need more study and discussion, right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem if it's an issue of local authority. I'm fine with that. I just, before we do it, and I know we would, I want to cast the net out a bit more broadly to get more of a comprehensive look at it. But yeah, I have no problem with local authority.
I would support local authority on making changes like that, too.
Yeah, I think certainly tools to local authority to adopt other tools to increase safety with the specific
Such as
sort
the
of bike
safety stop.
reference. We can do that, and then, of course, once we have any specific legislation during the session, we'd be working with the legislative committee and full council, and then I always check with staff on issues, so this one would be one, as you noted, the police chief and her team, and/or to the CACT and associated staff.
But it's interesting, Dave. One Idaho stop did know what that was, just Googled it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've seen people do that, and it go both ways. It helps, and then it confuses. But yeah.
And Mayor, if I could note, I neglected to highlight one additional change under 485, which is the honorary street naming. At the work session, it was a placeholder. I have put it in here now, and that if state authorities require, the city would support legislation to implement that part of your East End Small Area Plan recommendation. And doing the initial research with neighboring counties who've gone through this, in Richmond, it is a bit unclear whether Richmond General Assembly needs to take action, VDOT, or the Commonwealth Transportation Board. So as we sort through that, I just worded it that if state authority is required, then council would support that.
All right, thank you. Anything else people want to discuss, or do we have a motion? I think all the changes have been incorporated into the document, right? So we don't need to call them out in our motion?
What you all are referring to is attachment 1, and that's incorporated by reference in the resolution. So pending city clerk and city attorney's confirmation, I would recommend moving to adopt TR 23-35 as amended in attachment 1.
I would move the approval of TR 23-35, adopting the City of Falls Church 2024 legislative program as amended, with thanks to the members of the legislative committee, specifically Phil Duncan and Debbie Hiscott.
How about you? But you wanted special thanks.
No,
I
special
would move
thanks
to say
actually go to
special
city.
thanks to the chair of the legislative committee. Do we have a second for my amendment? All right, we got a motion, I think. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Leon on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Shunts-Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yeah.
And Mayor Charter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Next item?
Oh, here we go. We have TR 23-37, the annual resolution establishing the 2024 city government holiday schedule.
So Mayor and members of council, this is essentially the same schedule that would be proposed for 2024 as was in effect for 2023. There was a question at the work session about the state holiday of the first Tuesday after the first Sunday in November as being a state holiday for Election Day. I provided an email to council just with some thoughts on that, and this resolution does not include Election Day as a city holiday, but we'd happy to answer any questions about that or take council direction on that.
All right, questions, comments, thoughts?
What's everyone else doing?
That is I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that, what Fairfax or, surrounding jurisdictions are doing. I should have looked that up, but I have not.
I think when I Googled it, I think Loudoun and Fairfax were taking them as holidays, if I remember correctly, and maybe Arlington School had it as a holiday, but I don't remember. Don't quote me on that.
Well, certainly our colleagues at the city schools do take it as a teacher work day, and that is very helpful to the registrar, or maybe just a holiday.
But this year was the first year that did not happen.
Oh, they did not do that. Okay.
And I don't know what the calendar looks like in the future.
So the registrar has always appreciated that because we have the Oak Street School as a polling place. But I don't have definitive information about what our surrounding jurisdictions are doing.
All right, does anyone either have a motion or additional thoughts? Mr. Snyder?
I think that the idea of Election Day being a holiday to encourage people to vote and to make the facilities more convenient for those who do is a good idea. I would support it, but I don't feel strongly if the views of the rest of the council are such that it wouldn't pass. But I think there's some wisdom to that, to making that a holiday in terms of making it, freeing up parking and other spaces for voters and creating a precedent about how important voting is, and that a lot of places do grant it as a day off to encourage voting.
Mr. Shields, you had some comments about, or had thoughts that you previously made. Would you like to re-articulate those?
So the comments I provided to the council is that city staff we're kind of constantly on standby on Election Day to support the registrar for an effective and efficient running of the election. DPW staff, command staff for the police, in particular, and then Rec and Parks staff. And so there would be some operational impacts to staff. We would work those out, but if that were a holiday, there'd be some things to work through. In terms of our own workforce and encouraging them to vote, or making it very easy for them to vote, we do not charge employees with vacation or personal leave time. We do, when they take time off to vote, we just ask that they coordinate that with their supervisors so there's no interruption to public services. So that's the way we handle it today. And so I just shared some of those operational concerns that I had, which I think are resolvable, but I just wanted to make sure the council was aware of them in the context of having Election Day as a vacation or a holiday. And then one other note, we did have a survey 2 years ago, and just sort of without a whole lot of thought or sort of background on the issue, employees did weigh in that they, on balance, would prefer a 3-day weekend as opposed to the Tuesday for Election Day, just for family trips and things like that. So that was some feedback that I provided to the City Council.
All right, additional thoughts?
For what it's worth, the city schools are not off on Election Day in 2024.
I am too. I'm fine keeping it as is. I think also the city schools used to not have off on Veterans Day, and the city staff did have off on Veterans Day, and that often caused problems with buses and other, just, if a bus needed repairs, the property yard was off those days. So now that the schools do have off on Veterans Day, it's nice that that's aligned. So I think it's okay to keep the Election Day aligned, especially because you do support employees being able to vote, and many others are there helping people vote.
Move to adopt TR 23-37.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Ms. Leon?
Yes.
Ms. Sean Siskott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right, moving to other business. Anyone have any business not on the agenda? Mr. Duncan, not yet on the,
No, not the minutes. There was, at our last meeting, discussion about a traffic signal was on permanent yellow, red flashing. I just wondered what came of that.
it's resolved, isn't it?
Right, I remember reading the email that the squirrels got into it, but have we killed the squirrels, or are we anti-killing squirrels, or where are we on that?
I don't know the status of the squirrels, but the power has been fully restored to that signal. There was a fault, and so the signal was getting electricity, but not at the voltage it needed, and so it was lapsing into flash mode. That issue has been resolved. And I will note for the council, we do have, as part of our standing up of the Rapid Transportation Response Team, one of the staff members that we've hired has skill sets in signal maintenance.
Squirrel killing.
In signal maintenance, and so we are building our greater in-house capacity and not relying as much as we have in the past on our contractors. And so we are hoping to see positive results from that. And also want to thank Cindy Mester for her escalating this issue with Dominion. It had sort of languished for a little bit, and it did get addressed. Thank you.
All right. Any other business on the agenda, standing committees?
Under the comments rubric, I just want to confirm that tomorrow GovOps is meeting, is that right? Okay.
Yes, we are meeting at noon to talk about process improvements.
Okay. And tomorrow night at 5:30, the VFW is hosting the Chamber Mixer, at which Mayor Tarter is one of the honorees. Councilmember Connolly was previously honored, so they're doing a good job of honoring us. Anyway, invite.
I thought it was at the Falls.
It's at the VFW. Is the Chamber Mixer. The Falls is an unofficial event that you're certainly welcome to come to also. The Falls is at 7 o'clock.
Someone just approached me and said it was 6 o'clock. They thought it was 6.
I think you can come anytime. Well,
But I don't know if anyone else will
It's
be there.
7.
ask
I know,
Celeste.
well, so Ed Salzberg just mentioned to me that they,
I'll meet them there.
VFW is 5:30.
just start early. You guys, I don't think you have to be told, but why don't you guys go at 6
Yeah.
and start
And
early?
anybody in the public is welcome to stop by at the Falls at 7 o'clock tomorrow night to toast and roast Mayor Tarter and Councilmember Duncan. It's
I'm well
a
done.
staff and council pre-send-off.
And continuing in the calendar theme, Thursday night, Planning Director Mr. Stoddard appears to be giving an address to the League of Women Voters about the future of Falls Church in the next 5 years. Sounds interesting. And over the weekend is one of the mayor's favorite events, the Sinfonetta Christmas concert.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, I just came across that on my calendar the other day. I thought maybe you guys just didn't want me to conduct this year, so you didn't tell me. But it appears to be Saturday, December 2nd.
It is. Okay.
Hold
you-
on. Stand by on that. Stand by on that. Nope, sorry. Sunday, December 3rd at 4 o'clock. Yes,
Would you mind, Madam Clerk, sending out a reminder electronically?
unless my email is incorrect, that's the date for it. Also, the Tree Fest is this weekend at 4 Ps, VPAS Tree Fest for charitable
What time is that?
purposes. They do it, I think,
2 to 5?
Friday to Saturday evenings. Anyway, those are just some things on the calendar.
A few of your favorite things?
A few of your favorite things. Unfortunately, yeah, there are other things going on Thursday. I have to be downtown at a meeting, so I don't have an exhaustive record of what else is going on here on Thursday. But
Wyatt, that's the employee awards lunch on Thursday.
That's right.
sorry to have to miss
What
that.
time is that? Is that noon to 3 or something? Okay.
That's correct. That's at the community center.
I have a call at 1, so I'll be there, but not for too long, and a call at 2. Okay, what other things do people have before we adjourn? Anything else? How about our
Well, we should do the minutes.
Let's do them.
It looks to me like the minutes from September 26, 2023 are in good order, with the glaring omission at line 312 of the extensive discussion that I remember about the mural on the wall at Haycock being a 75-foot rendering of the mayor in his Charlie Brown sweater. I'm sure that we discussed that and came to unanimous consent that we'd agree on that.
And we're going to do that, right?
Yeah, that's what I heard. At any rate, I move to adopt meeting minutes of September 26, 2023 as presented.
Someone want to second that?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? The ayes have it. Anything else anybody wants to talk about before we
We have to
adjourn?
get all the minutes done at December 11th.
No, it's not happening. It's not- If we're resolving to do that,
You have minutes for
everybody gets
ombudsman, Board of Commission or
two
something?
dishes worth of minutes for that meeting if that's, I don't know.
All right, anything else?
I'll enjoy
anybody wants to
following
say?
you as you do the minutes next year.
All right, let's go ahead and adjourn.